Part 2. Why is it the consensus that the Jesus character did exist in history, if he indeed didn't? Well, years of antagonism follow. Between post-70 and pre-325, some 255 years, the main Gnostic versions of Christianity existed alongside the new literal version of Christianity. And we know this because the Catholic Church actually tell us so in their own polemics against heretical Jesus stories. This was written in 170 by Irenaeus, and it lists all of the Gnostic Christian beliefs at the time. Even though they burned all the literature, they recorded it for us in their own polemics. And the Nag Hammadi manuscripts discovered in 1945 that have escaped the book burning process also prove the dual existence of these two main Jesus versions during this time period. And this had the usual dire consequences. They did not get along. In this time period, the literalists, I'll start calling them the literalists from now on to separate them from the Gnostics, formed a hierarchy and wrote the Gospels which form part of today's canon, among other Gospels that did not make it into the canon. The Gnostics already had their Gospels and continued to write other Gnostic Gospels. We now come to a major event in world history and the reason why we have so many Christians in the world today. We had a four-way Roman civil war. Pre-325 Common Era, the Roman Empire was ruled by four joint emperors: Constantine and Maxentius in the west, Licinius and Maximinus died in the east. And after three civil wars in quick succession, only one remained, Constantine, whose mother just happened to be a literalist Christian. Now, Constantine himself was a pagan, but after his victories, he began to like the ethos of his mother's beliefs, and he understood the benefits to him of implementing a despotic theocracy, with the doctrine of one God, one religion, one ruler, appointed by God, obviously. Constantine passed edicts which legitimised Christianity, and then proceeded to enforce Catholic Christianity. Now, I'll explain the term heresy. I apologise if everybody does know it, but some people don't realise what Catholics mean when they say heresies. When they say heresy, they mean alternate Jesus beliefs, as opposed to when they talk about the pagans, which are the non-Jesus beliefs of the Greeks and the Egyptians and the Romans. And in order that this remedy may be applied with effectual power, we have commanded that you be positively deprived of every gathering point for your superstitious meetings which belong to the heretics, and that these be made over without delay to the Catholic Church, and no facility whatever be left for any future gathering, in order that from this day forward none of your unlawful assemblies may presume to appear in any public or private place. Let this edict be made public. This is post 325 Common Era, and this was the beginning of the end for all forms of Gnostic Jesus worship. From here on in, being a Gnostic Christian becomes very difficult. Constantine's successors, which started with his sons and then moved on to other dynasties, proceeded to make Catholic Christianity the official state religion, banning all pagan religions and all heretical versions of Christianity. Starting from 415 onwards, those who publicly assembled to practice heretical rites may have their property taken and be executed. Anyone who converts an Orthodox Christian from the Catholic Church to another religion or heretical sect will have his property confiscated and be executed. Pagan sacrifices are forbidden. Pagan temples and shrines are to be torn down and replaced with a symbol of Christianity, the cross. Anyone who mocks this law faces execution. Pretty strong stuff. This marks the start of the brutal eradication of Gnostic Christianity and the brutal enforcement of Catholic Christianity. We now move into a 1,300-year enforcement and cover-up. It is well known and well documented how Catholic Christian history and the later Protestant versions panned out from 325 all the way through to the 1600s. Torture, executions and book burning. Not only were the heretical adherents silenced with execution, their literature was destroyed along with them. And we know this because the Catholic Church of the time tells us that they committed these acts of intolerance and barbarity. They were determined to be the only Jesus religion in existence. So, we know for certain that other Jesus religions and other Jesus stories existed, but we will never know their full content because the full content has been destroyed beyond recovery, courtesy of the Catholic Church. We will now look at recent history from a UK-centric viewpoint. Why are so many people in the UK Christians? Or not so many these days as it would seem.
Now we've entered the post-theist era.
Theist era, yes. Until 1828, there were no non-Protestants in public office. In fact, no non-Church of England Protestants in public office. The law forbid it, the Test Act of 1673. This act was repealed in 1828, so from 1673 through to 1828, the House of Commons was an exclusive Protestant Church of England men's club. And that's quite an important point. In the 18th century, due to the Enlightenment reaching the masses by way of pamphlets and speeches, largely coming over from France, religious belief among the population in Britain was reduced to very low levels. Christianity in England and Wales almost died out. The pews were all but empty and churches became derelict. But although the population was by now largely atheist, agnostic or deist, the rulers and the extremely powerful and wealthy of the country were all Christians, and they were concerned about the non-Christian nature of the lower classes, the majority of the country. Despite vicious use of the blasphemy laws by the clergy of this period, vicious use of it, atheism, agnosticism and deism were winning through, and the Enlightenment was taking hold. By way of chance for the Church of England, in 1807, Parliament desired to address the levels of poverty in society by offering free schooling to all children of poor families. The idea being that with education, with schooling, people could educate their way out of poverty. So a fantastic sentiment, obviously. But fearing that the Enlightenment views would find their way into the classroom and expedite the irreligious nature of the country, the Church of England was not slow to react. It's seen its congregation dwindling. It didn't want it to dwindle any further, so it put itself forward as the conduit with which to deliver that education.
Just like now.
Just like now. Oh, they had a larger grip at this stage, yes. They asserted that the state religion should form the basis of state education. With nothing but ulterior motive in mind, the Church of England took charge of the schooling project, took full charge of the schooling project. And all children in state schooling in England and Wales received a daily dose of extremely virulent religious instruction and enforced daily worship, with a bit of maths and English thrown in, and even that was taught by way of reference to the Bible. It was Christian indoctrination of children on an industrial scale, and it was utterly successful. Within a generation, Christianity among the population had been restored by way of indoctrinating children. And this is where we need to be brutally honest with ourselves. The grandchildren of the 1880 school children who were subjected to this virulent Christian indoctrination are our own grandparents today. And hence why many pensioners today are staunchly Christian. Pleased to say, as you say, that more than 50% of the country now register as having no religious belief, but that percentage changes when you go to the 70 to 80-year-old group. There is still a large Christian congregation in that demographic. They are a direct product of the 1811 National Society, the organisation created by the Church of England to take control of all state schooling in England and Wales. So, if the character actually didn't exist, and we have been duped by the events of history into believing he did exist, can reason fight back? We still face the issue that no matter what the majority view of the population is, the country is ruled by Parliament, which is still largely religious in its makeup and will therefore always support religious indoctrination in schools. But the ease of information shared on the internet, free speech, such as this evening, and religious satire in comedy are making inroads into getting young people today to question religious dogma. Hopefully, within a generation, the makeup of the House of Commons will tip in favour of secularism, and items such as the enforced worship of deities in schools will be questioned and abolished. The consensus view today is that Jesus did exist. So, do we have the right to challenge that consensus? Well, the treatment of Giordano Bruno in 1600 tells us not only do we have the right, but it is an absolute necessity. Because the consensus is not always correct, no matter how strong it is. Bruno put forward the idea that all the stars of the firmament are actually just suns, the same as our sun, only a lot further away, hence they look so small, and as such could all have their own planets orbiting them. Being the only person to hold this view, he was burnt at the stake in 1600 for heresy and blasphemy by those that supported the consensus that the Earth is the centre of the universe. So, we have seen tonight that literature which demonstrates that Jesus concept existed before Pontius Pilate became prefect of Judea has survived the book-burning episodes of post-325 Common Era through their concealment from view. We have also seen our present-day calendar, events in the late 1st century Palestine and ancient scripture demonstrate together that the Matthew, Mark, Luke and John Jesus stories are not biographies. They are pure fabrication. They are reverse constructions. It is hard to explain such items to a nation or the wider world because it challenges the consensus. But as we know from the fate of Giordano Bruno, being the only person to hold a view does not necessarily make you wrong and the consensus correct. The consensus will change at some stage in the future, and Jesus will be demoted from the theology section to the mythology section in libraries, where he will take his place alongside Mithras, Zeus, Odin, Osiris, Attis, Bacchus, etc., etc. I would like to close tonight's presentation with a quote from a dying Catholic priest of 1732, Jean Meslier. "Human blood has flowed since the time of Constantine for the establishment of these horrible impositions. The Roman, the Greek and the Protestant churches, by vain, ambitious and hypocritical disputes, have ravaged Europe, Asia and Africa. Add to these men whom these quarrels murdered the multitudes of monks and of nuns who became sterile by their profession, and you will perceive that the Christian religion has destroyed half of the human race." Strong words from a Catholic priest. His dying confession, that was. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and attention this evening. I believe we'll now have a break for refreshments and some notices, after which I'm happy to take any questions you may have. Thank you.